Hello everyone. So the next topic which we will be discussing today is about the cell cycle. So in this cell cycle is basically an ordered series of events. So it is a sequence of events by which a cell duplicates its genome and even actually divides into the two daughter cells. So in this we will be discussing the main two phases of cell cycle, the diagrammatic representation of the cell cycle, and what are the functions, the specific functions. For example, there is M phase, there is G2 phase, there is S phase. So what are the specific functions of this? So let's get started with the first slide of cell cycle. So it is an ordered series of events, and it is a sequence by which a cell duplicates its genome and will even actually divides into the two daughter cells. So what are the two phases of cell cycle? So there are two phases of cell cycle. First is the interphase and second is the M phase. So what is interphase? Interphase is also known as the resting phase of the cell cycle. An interphase is the time during which the cell prepares for division by undergoing both the cell growth and the DNA replication. Now the interphase has been further divided into three categories, that is G1 phase, that is the gap 1 phase, G2 phase, that is the gap 2 phase, and the S phase. So the interphase has been further divided into three categories. Next is the M phase. So the M phase, it is the mitotic phase or the phase of the equational division. So this phase is known as the phase of the equational division, as the cell here undergoes complete reorganization to give birth to a progeny that has the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. So in M phase, the number of chromosomes will be same as that of the parent cell. There will be no change in the number of chromosomes as in the mitosis phase, that is the reductional division, in which the number of chromosomes reduced to half. But in case of mitotic division, it is an equational division where the number of chromosomes remains the same. Now the next is, we will be talking more about the interphase here. So the interphase, it is the first phase of the cell cycle, and it has been recognized by the growth period where the chromosome gets duplicated and the cell prepares for the cell division. So this is what is happening in interphase. Now interphase, we will be depicting it through the diagram also, that interphase happens between one cell division or mitotic phase and the next. It lasts for about 23 hours. So this cycle lasts for about 23 hours, and it is one of the longest part of the cell cycle because it further involves three subphases, and this is the most longest active and the longest cycle. Now the G1 phase. So the interphase, as I was telling you, that interphase has been divided into three subphases, that is the G1 phase, the S phase, and the G2 phase. Now what are these phases? G1 phase, it is known as the gap 1 phase. So what is happening in this period is the cell, they grows in the size and they synthesize the cell organelles and other macromolecules such as proteins that serve as the building blocks of the cell. So it is the period, it is the phase of the cell between the mitosis and the initiation of replication of the genetic material of the cell. So during this phase, the cells, they are metabolically active and continues to grow without replicating its DNA. And the cell accumulates sufficient energy which is required for the division. So this is the G1 phase. The next comes is the S phase, which is also known as the synthesis phase. What is happening in this phase is DNA replication takes place during this phase. So if we take an example here, so if the initial quantity of DNA in the cell is denoted by 2n. Then after replication it will become 4n. However, the number of chromosomes will not vary. If the number of chromosomes during G1 was 2n, it will remain 2n, and at the end of the S phase also it will remain the same. So centriole divides into two centriole pairs in the cell which contains centriole. So this phase, which is known as the synthesis phase, here chromosome gets duplicated during this phase and give rise to spindle fibers. And the entire S phase requires energy expenditure to proceed. The next and the last phase of the interphase is the G2 phase. So it is the second gap phase, and it is somewhat similar to the G1 phase. So it is very much similar to the G1 phase. So what is happening in this period? So during this period, the cell grows in the size and making more proteins and organelles. So they make proteins and various organelles. So all the preparation for mitosis gets completed before the cell enters the mitotic phase. So after this phase, that is after the G2 phase, the cell will enter the M phase. So that is why all the mitosis gets completed before the cell enters the mitotic phase. So during this process or during this phase, the RNA, the proteins and other macromolecules that is required for multiplication of the cell organelles, spindle formation and cell growth, they are produced as the cell prepares to go to the mitotic phase. The next phase is the mitotic phase or the M phase, which is just after the G2 phase. So here the cell, its genetic material and cytoplasm, they form two new cells. The M phase involves two different critical processes that unfold into the following orders, that is the mitosis or karyokinesis or cytokinesis. So that has been divided into further two phases, the karyokinesis, that is the formation of the nucleus, and the cytokinesis, that is the division of the cytoplasm. Now this is the cell cycle. So here we have depicting that there are G1 phase, S phase and G2 phase and the M phase. So M phase have been further divided into these parts, that is prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase and cytokinesis. So we have discussed all these phases in details, that what is G1 phase, what is S phase and what is G2 phase, and here it is written that these are some of the functions that are being done in case of the cell cycle. So we have discussed all the phases in detail. Now this is just a summary that what we have studied till now. So approximately there are 95% of the cell cycle which is spent in the interphase. So it is one of the longest cell cycle, as we have studied this earlier, because it has three further phases, that is the G1 phase, the S phase and the G2 phase, and these varies from species to species and from cell to cell within the species. Now in most of the cells, M phase takes an hour, which is a small fraction of the cell cycle. So what will be discussing here is the approximately total cell cycle time which is happening in the cell cycle or cell division. So the G1 phase, which lasts for about 11 hours, the S phase, which lasts for about 8 hours, G2 phase it's about 4 hours, and M phase it's about 1 hour. So these are the time durations during which the phases, they take how much time for the cell cycle. Now interphase, as it was being told also, that interphase is one of the resting phase and it is the one of the active and the longest phase during the cell cycle. So what is it, what is the function of this? So this function of this is preparing the cell for the division, both undergoing the cell growth as well as the DNA replication. So there will be a DNA replication and the cell growth, both of these functions will be in the interphase. So interphase has been further divided into three parts. Now we will study about the S phase, which the main function of S phase is the DNA replication. It is the synthesis phase. So here the synthesis or replication of the DNA takes place. The last of this cell cycle phase is the M phase. So it starts with the nuclear division. So it was being studied in the earlier slides also, that the M phase has been divided into two, the karyokinesis and the cytokinesis. The karyokinesis is the division of the nucleus. So there is a division. So karyo, which means nucleus, and kinesis, which means division. So there is a nuclear division which takes place and ends with the division of the cytoplasm, that is cytokinesis. So in the cell cycle, it was being represented that in case of M phase, it has been further divided into many phases, that is prophase, anaphase, metaphase, telophase, and the last phase was about the cytokinesis. So this usually ends with the division of the cytoplasm. Now, what is the importance of cell cycle? We have discussed all the important phases in the cell cycle. We have discussed the functions of that phases in the cell cycle as well. Now, what is the overall importance of the cell cycle? So the importance here is it prepares the cell for the future cell division. Each round of cell division will result in the gradual decrease in the daughter cell, and it will become half in size of the parent cell. So that will become half in the size of the parent cell. Now the genetic material also reduces in the daughter cell. Now this situation summarizes the importance of growth before the cell division. So the importance here is about the cell growth. So to accomplish the growth and prepare for cell division, cells need to undergo different phases. So they need to undergo different phases, and we have discussed all these phases in detail. Now these are some of the references.